Officer Brian Sicknick, Capitol Hill police officer, we all know he died shortly after the Capitol Hill riots. And when we originally heard about his death, it was on the premise that he was murdered by the Capitol Hill rioters. Well, now there's kind of new evidence that is coming out. And I want to go back through this carefully because I want to make sure that we respect him, we respect his death, and I want to make sure that we pay tribute to him. We certainly want to honor his memory and thank him for his service. Certainly don't want anybody dying in this country early unnecessarily. That being said, we got to be real clear on what happened here. How did he die? Because there was this big rush to say that he was killed by these rioters. And now the evidence just doesn't match up to that, it's looking like. So let's go back to the Democratic memorandum that they submitted in the Donald Trump impeachment proceedings, and they reference this. They say the insurrectionists killed a Capitol police officer by striking him in the head with a fire extinguisher. So this top sentence here, I clipped this right out from their memorandum. They killed a Capitol police officer by striking him in the head with a fire extinguisher. And they have footnote 131. If you go down to 131 down here, is written by a guy over at the New York Times, January 8th, so 2 days after the Capitol Hill insurrection, 2021. Mark Santora said Capitol Hill police officer dies from injuries in pro-Trump rampage. And so this is part of the problem when you are going through a formal legal proceeding and you're only referencing the news articles that were written just 2 days after the Capitol Hill riots. And so they're claiming as fact that the insurrectionists killed a police officer by striking him in the head with a fire extinguisher. Okay, so you can prove or disprove that. And the media was just running hog wild with this. And we saw this, and it was a gross day in general. And so you may have missed this in sort of the barrage of information flying around. So on the New York Times, so there's a great article that's posted over at revolver.news. They actually took these screenshots. I did not take these screenshots. Revolver.news they did the heavy lifting on this article. So go check them out. And I think Tucker Carlson covered this last night as well. He said from the New York Times, he dreamed of being a police officer. Then he was killed by a pro-Trump mob. We have another one. Then on Wednesday, pro-Trump rioters attacked the citadel of democracy. They overpowered Mr. Sicknick, who's 42, struck him in the head with a fire extinguisher, according to 2 law enforcement officials, with a bloody gash in his head. He was rushed to the hospital and placed on life support. He died on Thursday evening. Okay, so that was the original synopsis from the media. Then we had, even before that, we had on January 7th, the U.S. Capitol Police. They also posted a press release, and they said here at approximately 9:30 p.m., on January 7th, U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick passed away due to injuries sustained while on duty. He was responding to the riots on Wednesday. He was injured while physically engaging with protesters. He returned to his division and collapsed. He was taken to a local hospital. He succumbed to his injuries. It's going to be investigated by the Metro Police and the department's homicide branch, the U.S. Capitol Police, and our federal partners. So a lot of people. Metro PD, the homicide branch, we got the U.S. Capitol Police, we got our federal partners. He joined the unit in 2008, and they expressed their deep sympathies, which of course we do as well. Speaking of that investigation, there was a lot of people, a lot of manpower going into this, and women power. Let's say a lot of people power, just to be inclusive on the show. Federal murder probe opened for Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who died following the riots. He was the 5th person to die as a result of the siege. The U.S. Attorney's Office, so that's what the Department of Justice, they opened a federal murder investigation into the death of Brian Sicknick, who died Thursday night after suffering injuries into the violent siege in the Capitol. 3 law enforcement sources confirmed to ABC News. This article was posted on January 8th, so 2 days afterwards, or 1 day after he died. The investigation is conducted jointly between the FBI, so we got the feds involved, and the DC Metro Police with cooperation from the U.S. Capitol Police. So major law enforcement sources are all floating around. Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen at the time said in a statement that the Department of Justice, quote, will spare no resources in investigating and holding accountable those responsible. Okay, and I agree with that, right? And for a long time since the Capitol Hill riots took place, I've been very, very interested in seeing what the official reports look like. What really happened here? Well, Revolver News, as I had mentioned, they posted this article, which made it onto Tucker last night, and they said, MAGA blood libel. Why are they hiding the medical report? And what you can do is you can go read that whole article. There's a lot of links, a lot of stuff here, but what I've done is I've sort of clipped a couple things that they were referencing here, and I just want to run through them. So first and foremost, they're saying here, They're pointing us over to ProPublica, and they say that, maybe he wasn't hit over the head. Maybe he wasn't gashed in the head with a fire extinguisher. They say before the officer's death had been officially announced late Thursday, the Sicknick family was rushing from its home in New Jersey to see him in a Washington area hospital as word circulated on social media that Capitol Police officers succumbed to grave injuries. So there was confusion about whether he was actually dead or not. Okay, the family was rushing over there. They had already seen posts that he was dead. Then the Capitol Hill Police came back out and said, no, he's actually not dead. And then he actually died. So last they heard, he was in critical condition on a ventilator, according to family members who spoke to ProPublica. While the news report said an unnamed officer was in critical condition after being bludgeoned with a fire extinguisher, family members did not have details of his injuries. They say Sicknick had texted them Wednesday night saying that while he had been pepper sprayed, he was in good spirits. The text arrived hours after the mob's assault on the Capitol had left more than 50 officers injured and 5 people dead. So his brother, Ken Sicknick, says, he texted me last night and said, I got pepper sprayed twice and he was in good shape. Family drove towards Washington. Apparently, though, he collapsed in the Capitol and they resuscitated him using CPR, which we're going to see whether that's accurate or not, right? But the day after that text exchange, the family got word that Brian Sicknick had a blood clot and had a stroke. The ventilator was keeping him alive. We weren't expecting it, his brother said. So just awful, as a family, going through that, losing a brother, it's just terrible. So this is another article that came over from CNN. It says, this is interesting. So on February 2nd, remember this article over at ProPublica was written 2 days after the fact. Okay, so January 8th, they're sort of piecing together what happened with Sicknick's brother. Then basically, less than a month goes by. February 2nd, we have a new report. Investigators struggle to build a murder case in the death of U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick. And that's been something I've been saying for a long time. The people who really did the damage on January 6th, they have to be prosecuted. They have to. And that's coming from me as a defense attorney. You're saying, wait a minute, they got to go prosecute these people? Of course, yeah, because if they don't, then it's going to undermine our entire judicial system. People are going to say, well, the MAGA people just got off with a slap on the wrist. Nobody's getting prosecuted for this. And they're going to use that to pass new draconian laws that are going to wreck the rest of the justice system, if it's not already wrecked. Okay, it's going to be used as a hammer to really make it more difficult on defendants everywhere. So I don't want that. I want to make sure that the people who really did the damage, that they're prosecuted according to law. I want to make sure that the people who were not there and who really did not cause damage are given a slap on the wrist, probation. We talked about several stories here where people were there the next day and they're being charged with federal crimes. They showed up the next day. They're being charged for text messages and things like that. But what about the people who murdered Brian Sicknick? Where are they? Why have they not been able to find them? Let's dig in. Investigators are struggling to build a federal murder case regarding a fallen U.S. Capitol Police officer, Brian Sicknick, vexed by a lack of evidence that could prove someone caused his death as he defended the Capitol during last month's insurrection. Authorities have reviewed video and photographs that show Sicknick engaging with rioters amid the siege, but have yet to identify a moment in which he suffered his fatal injuries, law enforcement officials familiar with the matter said. Soon after Sicknick died on January 7th, prosecutors in Washington opened a federal murder investigation, dedicating a team inside the U.S. Attorney's Office to build out a case, authorities said. And we've already heard from other people from the FBI and other law enforcement agencies there in D.C. that they are looking at hundreds of thousands of images, videos, documents. I mean, they've got just teams of people. And we've covered a lot of these indictments and these arrest warrants. People around the country are getting just rounded up. They're going to Arizona. I think there was a handful of, Proud Boys who were just picked up here. They were going to Hawaii. We've seen people in Colorado, Florida, all over the country. Law enforcement is going and capturing those people. So in the impeachment proceedings, when they're saying Donald Trump has to be held accountable for all of this stuff, you're saying, well, he didn't cause all of it. Okay, he said some things you didn't like, but the people who were responsible for the actual damage, which in my opinion is where the standard should be. It's not about what you say, but it's about what people do. That's a better line. That's a better thing to enforce. That's a better way to administer justice based on actions less than what people are saying. It's a bright line versus where the speech is not a bright line, and speech will slowly be just whittled away. Your freedom to speak will be whittled away. Here we have the allegation that somebody killed another man. And there's hundreds of videos all over the internet, thousands probably of videos, images, and photographs. They've dedicated the FBI, U.S. Capitol Police, U.S. Attorney's Office from the Department of Justice, or have a whole team dedicated to this stuff. So where are they? Where is this person? Well, they can't find him. To date, little information has been shared publicly about the circumstances of the death of the 13-year veteran of the police force, including any findings from an autopsy that was conducted by DC's medical examiner. Why not? In a statement the day after the insurrection, Capitol Police said Sicknick had been, quote, injured while physically engaging with protesters. He collapsed as a result of his injuries. He died later the next day. We read you that statement. It goes on, in Sicknick's case, it's still not known publicly what caused him to collapse the night of the insurrection. Findings from a medical examiner's review have not been released. Authorities have not made any announcements about that ongoing process. According to one law enforcement official, medical examiners did not find signs that the officer sustained any blunt force trauma. So investigators believe that the early report that he was fatally struck by a fire extinguisher are not true. One possibility being considered by investigators is that he became ill after interacting with a chemical irritant like pepper spray or bear spray that was deployed in the crowd. And that is corroborated by what his brother said, right, in those text messages. Investigators reviewing the video of the officer's time around the Capitol haven't been able to confirm that in tape that has been recovered so far. The case could be complicated if Sicknick had pre-existing medical conditions. It could not be learned if he did. Why not? Spokesman for the U.S. Capitol Police declined to comment. Then today, so that was a February 2nd article. Then today, new information comes out. New video helping investigators in search for the suspects in the U.S. Capitol Police officer's death. Federal authorities have narrowed down to a handful the number of suspects in the death of Brian Sicknick. U.S. official briefed on the probe said Wednesday, raising hopes that investigators can bring charges in the case. New video evidence shows it has aided the work of the FBI and prosecutors in what official investigators continue to view as a complicated and difficult case. Our leading theory that investigators are considering is that one of the suspects sprayed an irritant, perhaps bear spray, that caused him to suffer a fatal reaction, according to CNN. He was a 13-year veteran. He collapsed in his office after being, quote, injured while physically engaging with protesters. They struggled for weeks to build a case. Several people have been charged with assaulting police officers, but none in relation to Sicknick. They've dedicated a team. It's being investigated by everybody we've already talked about. Public information officer from the Metro PD, Sean Hickman, told CNN the case remains under active investigation. There is no further information available to provide at this time. All right. Well, the autopsy has to be done. Okay. This is something that we pulled over from PBS. Revolver also linked over here. If you're looking at autopsies, forensic pathologist Dr. Steven Sina says that autopsies are best performed if done within 24 hours of death. Before, organs deteriorate, ideally before embalming, which can interfere with toxicology and blood cultures. But autopsies performed on decomposed or even exhumed bodies can still provide vital new information. They usually take 2 to 4 hours to perform. Preliminary results can be released within 24 hours, but the full results may take up to 6 weeks to prepare. So we're getting close to that timeline. Right? It's been about just over a month since he was killed or died. And presumably the autopsy is done because he was cremated. Okay? He was put on display, honored at the U.S. Capitol ceremony by the Democratic leaders. And those are his remains. So he's been cremated. He arrives to lie in honor at the Capitol Rotunda. Are we going to learn more about that? I'd be very curious to see if there are murder charges. If there's evidence that he was murdered, that person should be murdered. But, not murdered, that person should be prosecuted, right? And then it's up to a judge and a jury to decide what the sentence is for him. But got to be very careful when we start throwing around those allegations when there's not evidence there to support it yet. The media went hog wild with it. This was all over the place. Everybody was saying that the Capitol Hill rioters murdered a police officer. We don't know if that's true yet. And this was something that fueled a lot of what took place in the impeachment proceedings. They were leaning on this in their memorandum. This was part of their theme. This was part of their parade of horrible things that happened on that day. And it's facts, not in evidence yet. Could be. Might come out later. They might have found that new evidence and it shows clearly that somebody hit him with something that would have killed him. But we don't know. It's not in evidence yet.